I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll have a few little housekeeping details before we do introductions here, and then we'll get this day started. Look at all these smiling faces on the day before spring break, and the weather's nice out there.
This is just the best day to give professional development ever.
Anyway, we thank you for coming, and we hope that you have a productive day. We hope that you have a day where you learn a lot, feel more confident when you leave here. Okay, so restrooms are just out the door, down the hall to the right, and they're just around the corner there. And so you just take care of personal needs whenever you need to.
There are also more ladies' restrooms downstairs.
Downstairs.
In case there's a line, which there might be.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Julie Akins from Chanute, and I work a long-time middle school teacher, and I teach concurrent credit class for high school seniors for a college, a local college. And most recently, I've been working with Sandy next door, and we've been working with Haskell Indian Nations University, writing some curriculum for them that go along with the new standards in all 4 subject matter areas, so that they can use it in class with their teachers and also online for their reservation teachers. And that's been a really interesting and rewarding experience. So,
I'm Brian Anderson. I'm an English teacher and the department head at Washburn Rural High School here in Topeka.
So we want to hear, just introduce yourselves please with your name and where you teach or what grade level you teach, and I guess we'll just start right here.
Alicia Klugas at Raleigh County in 6th grade.
Nancy North, Raleigh County, 6th grade.
Back table?
Bobby Hamilton in Bible School. I teach science, 9th, 10th, and 11th.
And what city is that?
Independence, Kansas.
Okay, very good. Good.
I'm Mary Haley, and I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade special ed at Riley County. And we do like each other. We didn't come in the same vehicle. I'm just blind, and I haven't got my new bifocals, so.
Okay.
Lori Getz, Royal Valley Middle School, 6th grade. And Ms. Bausch, same place, 6th grade. Jules Stidham, 6th grade. Math and language arts. Denise Henson, Middle School, 8th grade.
Denise, if you didn't get that over here. So.
Angie Draney, 7th grade social studies, Derby Middle School.
Diana Poliquin, 6th grade math and 8th grade language arts at St. Benedict's Catholic School.
Good. Back table?
Kate Hankins, Attica High School, I teach business.
Go ahead.
Cindy Jordan, Attica Middle School and High School, and I teach 7th and 8th grade math and English and science classes.
Carol Roll, Thomas More Prep, Marion Junior Senior High School at 7th and 8th grade English.
Betsy Linnell, Anderson County High School.
Okay.
Rachel Molden, I teach 8th grade language arts at Jeff West Middle School.
Good. We may ask some of our singletons, when we're doing group activities, you can choose a table and partner up with someone if you need to, if you're a singleton. So, okay. We'll do this for right now. Okay. Some of you already probably have located all the handouts. They're on that tiny URL address, HTTP tiny URL, and I think Susie sent you the information about that. We'll have some built-in breaks, but like we said earlier, if you just want to take care of your needs whenever you need to. We're going to be open to learning today. We've got lots to talk about, and I think most of it will be beneficial to you. And you want to talk about, there's a parking lot, so you have some sticky notes, and we'll just stick those questions if you have them on a bulletin board, but they're also doing today's meet. So Brian, you want to talk a little bit about today's meet?
Yeah, I've got, we've got it posted.
It's back here.
Back here where it says todaysmeet.com. If you just type in todaysmeet.com/MDPT live-2, any parking lot questions that you might have Susie Myers, our writing consultant for KSDE, will be checking that periodically, and so she'll be able to answer any questions that we are not able to answer. So, yeah, sticky notes or today's meet.
She'll respond to you through today's meet, and then she'll come in this afternoon and respond to some of the sticky note questions. And then MDPT, that's why we're here, stands for Multidisciplinary Performance Paths.
And by using that abbreviation, we're going to shave at least 20 minutes off the entire day, get you out into the nice weather, enter spring break all that much sooner.
Yeah. So today's primary objective is to move you from this to, that's how we want you to leave today. Yes, I can do that. So we'll see how you feel when you leave. Yes, won't that be wonderful? We're going to leave everybody will leave looking just like that. Okay, so these are our primary objectives. We're going to showcase some of the MDPT support materials, and we'll walk you through how to use those. We'll help you move from that initial understanding into the deeper understanding of what on-demand writing requires as opposed to shorter writing in class. And then we're going to help you integrate quality instruction into your curriculum so that you can meet both kinds of needs. So this is where we're going to start. How are you feeling today? Which Rob Lowe are you today? Are you that Rob Lowe from?
Peaked in high school, Rob Lowe.
Yes.
Are you an expert? Are you the Sheldon?
The most interesting man in the world.
Or are you Flo? Just going with the flow.
That's fine. So we'll ask you again at the end of the day. Okay.
So, this is our first audience participation moment. We're going to identify our comfort level with writing. So, front corner, writing, I don't do it. This corner, right, this other front corner, I do it because I have to. Right back there, you know, I'm getting better. And then back corner, writing is my thing. That's my bread and butter. I'm all about it.
So, hop up. Choose your corner.
Come on, Lori, hop up. Here, honey. Let me help you.
No tag teams just yet.
Getting better.
Getting better. Shall they figure out why they are where they are? Either way, I went myself.
All right. These are writing resources or writing people. Why did you guys pick, besides sense of modesty, but why did you guys pick where you're going to be at? English teacher?
My kids just finished the assessment this week. They came to class. They said they asked how often do we write, and one of the options was once a week, and that wasn't enough.
All right.
I'm a social studies teacher, and I try to incorporate it daily.
Excellent. Okay, you're getting better, people.
Yeah, that's great.
What about you guys? Why did you pick?
I'll go.
Yay!
I feel like each year, this will be my 12th year teaching, that I feel more comfortable.
Okay.
Even with new and different things that are thrown our way, I feel like I get a better handle on it, but there's always room to improve.
All right.
So.
You guys are my people. Even though I've been an English teacher for 11 years, I still feel like I'm getting better at it. I don't think I've quite got the handle on it. So you guys are my.
I'm getting better at it because when I first started, writing wasn't pushed. Writing was, well, if you have time, you can do this.
Right.
And now it's important because people realize what not doing it is doing to the kids.
In this corner, how many of you are ELA teachers? And how many of you teach something else? So that's good. I mean, that's good to know as well. So, and you know what? I've taught for 32 years, and I still feel like I'm getting better at it. So, but you don't stop with that.
Okay. So I do it because I have to, people. Why? Why do you judge yourselves that way?
I don't feel like I put in enough
Okay.
this year. I'd like to be better at it, and don't feel like I've done it this year.
I feel like more help our writing than you, because I teach computers, so
Yeah.
I teach the kids, you know, I help them get the writing on the computer with our English.
You're supporting the right.
Yeah, you're a part of the process.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can get everybody.
Yep. We're gonna. That's our target. That's our target for today, and some, you know, kind of moving this way. So this is our target for today, to help you feel like you have some direction and you know what you need to do and where you need to go. So, thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your honesty.
All right. So a little honesty first thing in the morning. We were trying to get you out of the center, which is the comfort zone, but we didn't want to put anybody into the panic zone, which is where people shut down and freak out. So our goal today, and our goal for our students, should be right here in the learning zone, because without struggling a little bit, no learning occurs. If it's too easy, then you don't have to apply yourself. But if you're, if it's the panic zone, if you're too panicked, then people shut down. People, are closed off, not receptive to learning. So we want to stretch you a little bit. So not comforted, not panicked, but.
And yesterday you talked about Vygotsky.
Oh yeah, this is for those of you who can remember way back to your
theory.
Educational theory and things like that. We're talking this comfort zone is your Vygotsky when you're the scaffolding. So you're out of the comfort zone. You just need a little help, a little support. So that's what we hope we can be today.
And Dr. Margaret Heritage, who does extensive work on classroom formative assessments, which the State Department is also focusing on, uses the same diagram for the gap. And she said every child, every student in every classroom should have that learning gap. It should be there all the time so that the learning is actually progressing, because the gap is where the progress occurs. And so she talks a lot about keeping the kids here in this learning zone, stretching them and pushing them toward where they need to go, but not so much, like Brian said, that they shut down or give up or quit.
So if you want to feel secure, do what you already know how to do. But if you want to grow, go to the cutting edge of your competence, which means a temporary loss of security. So whenever you don't quite know what you're doing, know that you're growing. Which must mean I'm growing all the time, because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. So, what is the multidisciplinary performance task, or the MDPT? Well, it's a couple different things. There's multiple texts, and then there's writing on demand. So, the MDPT is a performance task incorporating multiple disciplines, which requires students to engage with text, images, and diagrams with other resources, and then compose a narrative, informational or explanatory text, or opinion, or argument. Since we're all 6 and above, we will call that mode of writing argument, but the guys next door will call it opinion.
There was a little bit of confusion yesterday, so we want to make sure that we clarify that, because some of the participants thought that because we said argument at 6 through high school, that was all that would be on the MDPT at that level. So no, we're just clarifying the text type at our level is called argument instead of opinion. Okay, so as far as the basics for the actual assessment, we're going to talk a little briefly about the assessment. So we're going to talk about assessment, instructional components, and then we'll talk again about assessment this afternoon. So on day one, they'll have, the MDPT will be in 2 parts, and I know that some of you have already kind of begun in some of your schools. So on day one, the students are going to read and have access to 2 or 3 different sources related by a topic or by a theme. And they will, the sources together, all two or three of them total, at our grade level, will total 1,000 words, right at 1,000 words. In elementary, 3-5, there'll be 750 words total for all 3 resources. The text-to-speech option is available to all students, and we're getting a little bit of feedback that the kids are liking that. They will have guiding questions, and we'll clarify that later on today. They will have guiding questions that are geared toward the specific text type. So on day one, they will know the text type they are going to be writing about, whether that's narrative, informative, or informational or argumentative, but they will not know the prompt. So they'll know the text type, but not the prompt until day 2. And they will be able on day 1 to take notes, or for the activity 1, they'll take notes. They can use graphic organizers that they select.
As long as they are part of the regular classroom writing process. So if they're used to using a graphic organizer during writing, they will be able to use one during the MDPT.
And along that line, on the KSDE website, there's a section just for MDPT under ELA, and we'll give you the address for that later. But Susie created this just yesterday and posted it. Is this a graphic organizer? Because she's had some questions about, can I use this, can I use this? So it's a really neat little simple flow chart. You ask yourself these questions. Is it this? If it is, yes, then you go here. If it's not, then you go here. And you just follow the questions to determine if the graphic organizer, or whatever you want to use, is an appropriate, is an allowable resource for the students on the assessment. So, and this little poster is now available. If you're not on the ELA listserv, please email Susie so that you can get your name there, because she sent this out to everybody on the listserv yesterday. That's the only way she can contact you directly. Email Susie and ask to have your name added to the listserv. So if you're on the listserv, you got this yesterday. But it's also on that MDPT section on the website, which we will be telling you about. So a handy, helpful resource to make sure that you comply.
And we will also be talking later on more about graphic organizers and creating graphic organizers and what sorts of information will be good to be on your graphic organizers. Also, with notes, in the Kite browser and in the test itself, highlights are not saving. Like, so if you read it and a kid highlights a part of the text, that is not transferring over for some reason. So that's one of the things that they're working on for it to be fixed for next year. But it is not working apparently this year. But notes are saving if you do them electronically, or you have the option to, I believe, paper pencil notes. Kids will be able to use the next day.
So do students get the guiding questions on day 1?
They get the
Yes.
they get the guided questions,
Okay.
but they do not get the topic which they are going to write on.
Perfect. Okay.
The prompt. Right. And then day 2, this is day 2, they'll get the prompt that they'll be writing on. They can use their notes from day 1. They'll get a reminder section, and that's really important for them to read that reminder section. And then they'll have access to the actual text that they read the day before. There's a spell check tool in Kite if students have time to use it. They may or may not have time to use it. And then there again, they can use those same graphic organizers from the day before. So day 1 is for reading, note-taking, preparation. Day 2 is for responding to the prompt.
And both of these days are, as it's set up, they should both be, as much time as the kid needs. Schedule.
Reasonably speaking.
Yeah. School schedules might dictate
Reasonably
otherwise.
speaking.
Yeah. So, what is a field test? Well, the purpose of this test is to basically see if the thing works. It's to determine whether the items or prompts will produce valid and reliable information. So, what does this mean for the people, you know, where the rubber meets the road, the students and the teachers? This year, the scores will not, and I love that they use the quotation fingers, they will not count for accountability purposes, but a representative sample of students' responses will be scored by volunteer scores to see.
Some of you may have already received an email about that. So I know that they've been seeking some scores, so some of you may have already.
So this is to get like a norm reference to see,
Yeah,
figure out if they have a valid test and what we need to be looking for.
Yeah, and they have to use that information to set performance levels and to see what areas for improvement, and I mean, they have to have that field test trial period, so.
All right. So this is a Wordle. How many people have seen a Wordle before? Okay. So for the uninitiated, a Wordle, you select a piece of text, you plug it in to Wordle, and it spits out a graphic with the words that appear most frequently, given the most prominence in the Wordle. So the next three this slide and the next two are going to be standards for a content area. So I'm going to give you guys like 15 seconds because I think you're smart enough to do it in 15. I gave people 30 seconds yesterday, but you can do it. So see if you can figure out what content area standards these are. All right, so what kind is it? What kind do you think it is? Science.
Right off the bat.
All right, so yeah, these guys are super sharp. All right, this next one's gonna be a snap then. Okay, I'm hearing it. Yeah, these are ELA. Next one. Okay, you guys are good. These guys are smart. We're gonna be able to cruise right through this.
So MDPT, multidisciplinary, that keyword, multidisciplinary performance task, is focusing on where the overlap is, the things we have in common. If we really want kids to go out and be productive, intelligent, independent thinkers and citizens, they need to have that broad knowledge base, but they also need to have the interconnectedness, knowing where the subjects overlap and where they connect and how they fit together. And so the purpose of MDPT is to look at these areas where the overlap occurs, so that that's the common ground that we all have in common. And if you go back and actually look at some of those Wordles again, and the presentation will be on, you'll see words that topic, you'll see words that repeat, and among all of the standards areas. So what else did we see yesterday? Information.
Is that text, evidence?
Text. Yeah. So where those overlaps are, those are the areas that MDPT is focusing on.
So we get these three closely related activities. This is, in a nutshell, what an MDPT is. It's close reading of related resources and responding to those resources in writing, which seems like a lot of the things we already do in our classes.
And it is. High quality teaching, rigorous teaching should prepare the kids for any on-demand. And if you teach AP, you already do that. If you teach high school level preparation for ACT or SAT, you already do that. Or the work keys kinds of tests is just a natural extension of the instruction that the students are receiving in class. So let's sample it.
So, the question you guys probably have is, what will students experience? Well, for the the writing response portion for grades 3 to 5. That's about 1 to 3 paragraphs. For the secondary folks, that's approximately 3 to 5 paragraphs. Although if you have kids like mine, if I say it's 3 to 5 paragraphs, you're definitely getting 3 paragraphs. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell them 5.
Do we tell them how many paragraphs?
There's like a script, I think, that lays out everything.
And in the reminder section, there'll be some information. In that little reminder section on day 2, there'll be some information.
Can you tell them then to check the reminder section?
That's a good question for Susie. Yeah, we'll ask that of Susie. We'll just let her clarify that, because I don't want to say and mislead anyone. So, yeah, but we will ask that question. And thank you for asking. It's a good one.
And so for the adults who are about to practice the MDPT, getting a taste of it, your writing will be as long as it needs to be.
Okay, you want to take? I'll take the back side. You take this side. You take this side. Okay. Oh, they're over there. Sorry. Oh, ma'am.
What's that? Well, at least somebody recognizes my inevitable rise. So do we just want to let them do the whole thing and talk about it? Or do you just want to do the reading and then debrief and then do the writing? Okay. So we are going to give you approximately 10 minutes, but you guys have already shown that you're super smarty pants, so probably won't take you that long. But we're going to just go through the close reading portion. So don't flip to the very last page where it tells you to start writing. Just do the reading of the text. And then we'll kind of debrief about what you did and what will be expected of your students when they read, and then after that, then we'll proceed on to the writing portion of the
We
assignment.
want it to be kind of a mirror of what the students are going to do. So this first page is kind of what the students will have on day 1, and then you'll have your reading selections. And we'll do progress check in 5 minutes to see where you are. So you're just doing the first page and the reading selections. Are there any questions before we start? Carry on.
Okay, I'm going to bring everybody back. So, turn and talk to your compatriots. What was required of you as a reader when you did this activity? So you're making connections in your life and attention. Okay, kind of finish up your final thoughts.
Keep in mind, for an activity that we'll do later, you need, keep in mind what was required of you, I mean, what you felt like was required of you as a reader and the conversation that you had with your table partners. So basically, these are things that keep coming up. The students are going to be asked to, and you had to, read with a purpose and use those guiding questions to help you focus your reading, that close reading of the text, close and careful reading. And then if it's blue, we'll be talking about it later today too. Take notes or draw pictures to make that thinking visible, especially for that the photograph that was given, you know, with no caption. I mean, they're more than likely on the MDPT they'll be captioned, but with that, you know, there's a lot of inference there that has to be done. So in connecting that photograph to the text type. So, yeah.
And these two, the read the text closely and carefully and take notes and draw pictures, these are the essence of the close reading or the annotated reading, or I think about the Mortimer Adler essay, how to mark a book.
Yes.
You know, just that kind of conversation with the author, that getting into that text, kind of making it your own. So,
food for thought.
Yeah, how do you establish a purpose? How do you use those guiding questions? How do you make sense of what you read? And how do you make your thinking visible?
And analyze through text. And we're going to come back to this slide in just a minute. Okay, so now we'll give you about the same amount of time, 10 minutes or so, progress check at 5, to do the actual writing. So you're going to go to the next to the last page. You'll read your actual prompt, and then you can respond on the very back of the page there. So any questions? Thank you for being willing participants. So 10 minutes. Okay, so as you're finishing up, and if you're not quite finished, that's fine. You can go ahead and finish up. But as you're finishing up, we'll do the exact same thing we did before, and then we're going to pull all this together. So we need you to turn and talk and discuss what, as the writer, for the writing part of the MDPT, what did you have to do? What was required of you? So take about 2 or 3 minutes and talk that out. Okay, I'm going to bring us back together. And these are the things that keep coming up when you're talking about what do writers have to do. They have to obviously respond to that prompt, use their notes to guide their writing. They need to understand what the text type is asking them to do. They need to be aware and alert to the purpose and the audience and the context in which they're writing, using evidence from the text. Yesterday, we had a question, well, kids, I mean, you're teaching your kids in class as part of the instruction to cite sources, but in an on-demand writing activity, there's not time to do that. But the evidence should be there. I mean, the evidence will appear in the writing if the kids have read. I mean, there'll be pieces of that show up when they're writing. And then they're going to be using a modified writing process, and we'll talk about those last two later today. So when you're thinking about this task, this performance task that you've just completed, there's the reading part, there's the writing part, but behind that is the instructional piece, so that they can be able to come to the table, being able to read, being able to write, and mesh those two into a final product. So when you take a step back and look at what are the instructional components that have to happen before the kids can produce this piece of MDPT writing, that's what our goal is for the next hour or so, is to take a look at what has to happen for kids to be able to do that. So,
the questions that the Department of Ed thinks that we have seen come up more and more often. How did you attack the prompt? I don't know if attack is quite the right word.
I like approach.
but
whatever.
how'd you use your notes? How did you frame the text type and/or organize your thoughts? How did you acknowledge the audience and decide which evidence to use? And how did you use the writing process?
And we'll talk again about that a little later today. If it's in blue, we're going to talk about it again. So, when you're thinking about the reading part and the skills that have to occur, and the writing part and the skills that have to occur, how do those, what's that look like? And how do those mesh together to become this final MDPT product? So we're going to ask you to work together as a group and draw that or write that out somehow. That how do the reading piece and the writing piece come together for whatever they need to do for that final product. MDPT. I can take one of those, Brian.
Well, the problem is this one's out now.
Okay. And you can use the back if you don't like the lines. It doesn't matter. We apologize for the heat in the room. There is nothing, they haven't turned the AC on, and I don't think we can convince them to. So I said I'm going to go to Walgreens and buy a fan at lunch. Are you going to wait? Okay, so instructions, Brian?
So think about the steps that you went through. Think about the skills that your students might need. Think about the techniques that they could use for both the reading and the thinking and the writing portion, and kind of chart out your process. So some people, make it like kind of make it all in one thing. Some people make it more like a flow chart. Some people separate it out. Some people made a web. So just whatever you think the process, what did your process look like? What skills did you use? What process do you want your students to use? What skills would they use? So just,
Go. Up and at 'em.
it's okay.
Say that again. Okay, when you think about the reasons, what did you have to do? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what it's going to look. Well, we've seen trees and we've seen rivers and we've seen circles. I mean, however it looks out. But so for the reading part, what did you have to do? For the writing part, what did you have to do? What would the students do? And then how do you mesh those to get out to this, to produce this MDPT? What does that process? What does the reading part look like? What does the writing part look like? And how do they come together?
Pre-charting.
Yeah, we have.
Actually, it's the writing process.
to go with these questions.
But you don't know. You don't know the exact points. So hopefully knowing that. Okay, I'm going to be having it. I'm going to write this amendment, so I'm going to know clear about that.
So they know, I mean,
Details, the sporting details, what's the main idea. Doing a narrative, you would think about what kind of experiences did these people have.
Focus when you're reading.
Are going to apply or something. I had this related to a reading. So
I was mentoring, I was teacher,
I have
counselor.
written languages so cannot transfer. What they from onto read alone, take notes, and I have
First step is
synthesize. So it
doesn't say something.
It probably will, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they're going to keep adding pieces to it. They really want to take it, I mean, I hope you take it back.
Well, if there are things that are written for their IEP that they have to do.
Not good quality. I'm not good
Right.
Right, they use it, but you can't use those for them. Use it daily.
Yeah, right. Whatever, it will work. It will work, it will make it work.
Sir, our teacher resource. I'm picking these two. Yeah.
No, you can get one once, yeah, once. No, I don't.
Well, we had, what we did with novels, what I did with novels, I did highlight it, and we had that, and
Some of them, that may have to work.
you know, vocabulary, and so, out of those 4 kids, rules, very rules, blow your mind as to what he comprehends.
Yeah.
If he hears it and he says, yeah, you have to come in. Typing is a little bit better.
So they've already said.
And you can't accommodate them. No, because we have the only accommodations now. These type of notes, there are no accommodations now. It is a regular assessment or it is a dynamic assessment. And then these kids are holding an IQ or something else. I know, none of them qualify for the DLM. I'm not pointing, I would realize for the DLM.
I work writing test questions for the DLM.
Yeah, and so it's, none of these kids are low enough to well, but they're also not high enough. And so, their ability to synthesize information is really being spent by processing the text. Right, then there should be some option for those students, because what he can do is he can make an iPad and use voice recognition software.
I know, I've wondered,
And that's how you do it.
I picked up on
That's how I
blame it on her. She'll tell her. Okay, so what do
You know, it could be.
Still a platform.
Yeah.
It's not, the disability that's an issue.
The first thing actually is
Being limited.
The platform is the ability
Well, it makes you wonder if she's not, it's not a guilt to
You know, whatever the scope of the essay.
I think it would.
And so we've been able to do that.
My husband did one.
And my kids supported my dad in those essays, and on knowledge, like abolition and drawing around in second grade in history. And some of the regular topics. But, you know,
without adding foundation.
right.
It's not going to be a true test of the
Right.
And that's
3% of the population of teens.
I guess I was aware of it.
We can't scribe. I was told we can't scribe. I'll ask because I mean, I'll be honest with you, but I was told that you cannot scribe. They cannot, because for the reading, like, we used to read aloud, and now we read aloud, so it does read aloud. They took the social studies, how to read aloud, and there's no doubt in my mind, they didn't see what mine together with reading. But if they have to read it and write it on their own, I mean, they might as well be in that same level to get a wheelchair and the thing that they started on right. So, I'll ask you about that, but that was the last information that we had, right? There were no accommodations for that, even if it was all right.
Really? That doesn't make any sense to me.
No. And that's, you know, that's why we've been serving our
Yeah.
and they weren't being judged by what everybody else was being judged at, but they were still completely assessing.
But
they're going to decide that as far as knowledge, that's how they're going to tell you how to try it, which things do.
Yeah, but you know, but I think we want to. I mean, we want them to be assessed on the same things that their peers are assessed on. We need to give them the tools to be successful.
Well, so I think
Okay. Yeah.
And then somebody, we wrote one. We wrote one, right? Exactly. Somebody called. Oh, yes. Yeah.
There are.
They asked the question, we'll make it the answer.
Yeah, they did. Because we were told to begin with there wasn't. So.
Well, if it depends on where they're, what kind of IEP they use. Because if they're really, really
They're pulled from their instruction for family. They have written language deficits that are humanized. Written language disabilities and reading disabilities. I have my increased numbers of reading probably fifth, grade level 2, so I'm not worried about that. I have some parents in 6th grade students that are, I have some parents of 5, it's how they're going to do it. It's really going to do it. I mean, we were told
that's that.
okay.
Yeah, so then.
dynamic learning maps is creating, it's not CET, but dynamic learning maps is creating the alternate assessment. It's a different company.
Well, see, because these kids are too high to be able to see to me. And before it was never pants.
It's right there. Right.
And now there's no pants. So we were regular for the DLM and there's no pants. I can't do these kids with DLM.
Yeah.
They were leadership down the what
and that's not
Right?
Yeah. And I know the camp was
yeah, we were one of the only states that did that.
I know.
We had to get special permission.
But then you're tossing out like three
the mid-range
population that they're not.
They're the cusp.
So this year, even in 7th grade kids, they would just write a test and they would go in and see on during lunchtime, whatever, they had me or whatever, they would go in and see him, he asked them the other question, and they had to verbally give him names right on. Now, they didn't go in and written on that. They didn't know what the question was, but he would give them like a guiding question of what it was about. So like John Ryan was watching something, and they would take that because they were in with them, and they look at that. They would like get videos of their didn't have, minutes, he had 3 supporting details. Whatever his question was, and our kids were, I mean, some of the highest just because they can verbally tell you everything. Now, as you said, and nothing I can remember.
We're going to come back together and we're going to ask you to be adding some things to your charts as you go through the day today, so that we hope that they will be a useful tool to you to take back, that you will really, truly use. And if you're from 2 different schools or 3 different schools working at your table, then smartphones, and record the work of your posters. So, but we want them to be useful tools to you that you will actually use to kind of help you through this, the instructional piece of the MDPT process. So, we have a question or two we're going to ask, and then we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we have a video to watch, and then we'll go to lunch 11:30-ish, 11:30 to 1. It'll be 11:30-ish, and then we'll need you back at 1. So here's our big question. How, on your posters, you've talked about the skills that students are going to have to need to be able to read the prompt and understand it. And you've talked about the skills students are going to need for the writing piece, and then they're going to have to mesh those. That's like some of those, you're talking at least 3 steps, maybe more than that. So how do we help students acquire the necessary skills they're going to need in reading, the necessary skills they're going to need in writing, and then the necessary skills they're going to need to function on the multidisciplinary task? So that's the $64,000 question right there. So, bathroom break. Walgreens is right next door if you need something with ice. So
They don't have any fountain pops.
So it's 10:45.
Walmart or Walgreens doesn't? Oh, you know what? I bet it's not healthy.
There's Pizza Hut though, right across the street.
Oh, that's right. Pizza Hut's gone. Yeah. So we need you back in what?
It's 10:46, so 10:56.
10:56. He's a taskmaster too. So
I want to get to lunch.
Yeah.
I want to get you guys out of here.
And we will get you out of here early today so that you can actually go and enjoy the day. So, yeah. So everybody up and out of bathroom break, pop break, whatever you need to do.
Trivia crack break if you need it.
I'll play.
Chocolate.
Yes.
We've got a bunch of overachievers in here. They really want to do that.
All right. So the question that we left you with before break topic is how can we help students acquire these skills? And so, the question becomes, how did you establish a purpose? How did you use those guiding questions? How do you make sense of what you read? And how do you make your thinking visible? And then how do you analyze those three texts?
Okay, we're going to watch a video. What that is, go back, can you go back to that slide, Brian? That's close reading. I mean, that is close reading in a nutshell. Establishing a purpose, using guiding questions, making sense of what you read, making your thinking visible, analyzing the text, looking deeper into the text, maybe reading it more than once, most likely reading it more than once. So we're going to watch this video, and it's a New York teacher. It's a teacher in I think it's a 5th grade classroom in New York. And we want you to watch for these things. He's doing a lesson on close reading, and so we want you to watch to see how are the students making sense of what they're reading. What does a close reading process look like in his classroom? And how did students record their thinking? That's the note-taking piece of this close reading part of the MDPT process. So how did students make sense of what they were reading? What does the close reading process look like in this classroom? And how do students record their thinking?
Cambridge, would you mind reading our first learning target today?
I can get the gist and determine the main idea in a newspaper article.
The text I chose for today's class was an article from the Buffalo News about a Seneca school called Faith Keepers that teaches a lot about Seneca language and culture. Look at some of the important words in there. What's an important word in this learning target? Go ahead, Julia.
Seneca.
This Seneca, right now the 5th graders are studying the idea of culture through various case studies. Mainly they're focusing in on indigenous Native American peoples of Western New York. What's another important word that we're looking at, Mr. Steppa?
Main idea.
Main idea. What is that big idea that's really important to the author? In an assessment that I've given my students recently, I would notice that they weren't picking out really important details, especially as they relate to the main idea. So this lesson was really designed to help kids to see the connection between important details and main idea. What's another important word that we're looking at? Question.
Gist.
Gist. What is the gist? I'm asking you to jot the gist in the margin. What are you writing about?
The important parts of the story or article.
Yeah, well, what it's about, right? Today we're going to be starting a close read of a brand new text. I want you to think about all the close reading we've done before. We do a close reading process in my classroom, and it's often a multi-day process. And the first time kids read, they're reading just to get the flow of the text from the beginning to the end. And this is sort of a low-stakes moment in reading. And I want you just to read for the flow, all right? Show some perseverance. The second time they go back to the text, they're annotating it in several different ways in order to help them understand it. Circling important words and jotting the gist in the margins. If you're having a hard time, if this text feels really difficult to you, what is something you can do as a reader to help you to get through it and to make it a little more manageable?
Get the gist in baby steps.
Get the gist in baby steps. Take bite-sized sections, little paragraphs, right? Do I understand this paragraph? Do I understand this paragraph? And go through section by section.
I started reading the article by reading the whole thing just for the flow.
I used to do a lot more scaffolding and pre-reading activities before I let kids have a turn with the text. Something I've noticed about my students is that now that they're used to reading a text on their own for the first time and trying it out, they've shown a lot more perseverance.
And then I read it again and underlined all the important words, like traditional, school, and some of the names.
Choosing a text is always a really important process for me in teaching something like this. I was really looking for something that was an authentic text, something from a primary source, like a newspaper article, something within what they were studying so that it had a real purpose for them in reading it. And I needed something that was complex, something that pushed them, something that taught them new vocabulary, new academic vocabulary.
After every section I read, I wrote the gist down. And I went back in the paragraph to see if I was right, and then I went to the next one.
I gave my whole class the same complex text. And one reason for this is that we found differentiation is less about text complexity and more about the amount of text the student is asked to work with. For some students, they're able to differentiate for themselves by chunking the text into smaller pieces.
I'm going the gist for 2 paragraphs at a time. Demon Dowdy and his wife started the Seneca Faith Keepers.
For other students, we actually break the text up for them so that they only see a smaller amount of text at a time and don't become overwhelmed by the idea of what they're about to read. So look back at the title, look at some of those important details you underlined, look at the gists you wrote. I want you to jot your idea for this. What do you think the main idea of this article is? And then in about 2 minutes, we're going to transition ourselves over to the carpet area to continue the second half of our lesson. We read about it, we thought about it, we wrote about it, now we get a chance to talk about it. Jay, did you mind reading our second learning target for today?
I can explain the connection between details and the main idea in an article about the cynical.
You're going to choose one person near you, and you're talking about what do you think the main idea of this article is? And then what is one thing in the article, one little sentence, that helped you come up with that main idea? So in the activity today, I really wanted students to build a connection between important details and the main idea. The Seneca culture is dying, so they started a school to learn the culture. So I chose the details I wanted them to work with and hung them on charts around the classroom. And students moved around in groups with Post-it notes, read the detail, and had to make a case for whether or not that detail was important and connected to the main idea. Working with complex text can be really challenging, and these kids are 10 years old, so they get really antsy. So I try to design my lessons in ways that give them time to get up and move around the room.
That's because it's like their mom says something, and she speaks the language, and they don't get understand it. Yeah, because it's part of their culture, right?
I try to get kids talking to each other about text as much as possible, and it allows them to understand parts of text that maybe they didn't understand on their own, but can get from up here. I want to debrief with this question. What detail did you think was important? How did it connect to the main idea?
The one about the children learn about traditional songs. One of the details I thought was important on the wall was that some of the traditions are like, for the Seneca people, are like singing and dancing. I thought that was an important detail because it like tells you the tradition.
99% of Senecas don't know how to speak the Seneca language because that's about how their culture's dying because they don't really know how to speak their own language.
Yeah, so that one really goes back to that first part of the main idea that we said, right? The Seneca culture is dying. I use a close reading protocol because it gives the kids predictability in how they approach a text, and they've shown themselves to be much more willing to deal with a challenge. All right, let's do one more. Let's do one more. What's the detail? Mr. Seppa.
I was attending school as a teacher and making it for the young people.
How did the students make sense of what they were reading?
Took notes.
Multiple readings. They read it more than once. They took notes. They talked about it. They did the debriefing.
There was a purpose for each reading.
What's the purpose for each reading? What did his close reading process look like? His protocol that he used for close reading. What did they do first? Yeah. Read through it. Just read through it to get the flow. And then they went back, and what they do second? They started annotating by circling vocabulary words, a very good skill for close reading. And then they also were writing the gist, or the important points, in the margins. Those 3 little steps are powerful strategies to use. And then how did the students record their thinking? Well, they did the gist, and then what else did they do? Yes, they wrote their summary sentence, or their topic sentence, or their main idea sentence at the bottom. So they were recording that as well. What did you see around the room? How were they recording their thinking? On the post-its. Yeah, writing the detailed questions. There are 4 things that I love. Well, I like the whole video, but there are 4 things that I really love pointing out. The first one is that the scaffolding is taking place during the reading, not before, not after, but during the reading. The kids who are needing those extra supports, that extra time and attention, are getting it while they're reading instead of after or at some other time. You saw the man on the floor, and he was breaking the text apart for kids who needed it. The other thing that I like that he said is that differentiation wasn't so much about the complexity of the text, and Kansas, you know, is the front runner in text complexity. Our text complexity process has been adopted, you know, across the United States. So text complexity isn't so much what kids need differentiated, not the complexity of the text, but the approaches to the text. That's where the differentiation occurs, is in the approaches to the text and the methods that we use to help them access the text. So, and the 4th thing that I like were those classroom formative components. He was very clear with the learning I mean, he followed the classroom formative assessment protocol almost. It's almost a textbook example. He had the learning targets. They were very clear in kid-friendly language. Those kids knew what they were doing. The success criteria was there so that they knew what they had to accomplish, written as those I can statements. He was doing those progress checks all along the way. So the classroom formative process was very evident. And so I like pointing out those as we talk about those. There's on your bookmarks, the blue or white sheets that you have that have the bookmarks. If you look on the back side, the writing standards are on the first side, and on the back side are some helpful websites that are not on the tiny URL. These are some additional ones. So if you look at number 4, this is a fairly new, fairly recent website, Great Milestones Kids. And it says for elementary students, but you can cross that out because as of like February 15th, they've added middle and high school to it as well. So these Milestones videos are wonderful. You can just go online and watch these little clips of and they're all tied, and they're in math and reading. What does writing look like at the kindergarten level? What should a kid be able to do? What does research look like at an 8th grade level? And they just go grade level by grade level. So if you want to see these video examples of quality, rigorous instruction in reading and math, I suggest the Milestones videos there.
So taking your charts, is there anything, talking amongst your group, is there anything that you can take from that video and add it to your chart on your reading side? So if you haven't addressed any of these questions, how do I establish a purpose, or how do I use guiding questions? How do I make sense of what I read, and how do you make your thinking visible? If you can take things from the things that he modeled in the video and add them to your chart. So we'll give you a few minutes to discuss.
Or that you may already do in your classrooms.
Yeah,
but how do you help kids do this on the reading part? So see what you can add to your chart. Will take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, no more than that, to add to if you need to add anything. Okay, Brian, you want to kick this off?
Sure, why not? All right. The 3 text types. There will be 3 options that your students will have when they are writing, doing the writing portion of the assessment. And the first one is argument or opinion, and that's for us in the secondary level, that's argument, supporting a claim with sound reasoning and relevant evidence. I think it's kind of persuasive. We used to call it persuasive writing, and now the nomenclature is different. It's argument for argument. Informational / explanatory writing. Those are just standard given the folks info about it. Increase subject knowledge to explain a process or to enhance comprehension. And then the third option is narrative writing. And this is can be both fiction and nonfiction. So conveys experience, for example, fictional stories, memoirs, anecdotes, and autobiographies. And in writing, and we talk about raft now? We talk about raft?
Yeah, we did yesterday.
Okay, so how many people are familiar with raft writing? Okay, it's and we'll kind of talk about it more because there'll be more opportunities to talk about it. But it's the raft stands for role, audience, format, and topic. So you have to kind of, depending on what you choose, and it can go cross-curricular. If you wanted to do, if it was, like math, you could be your role. You could be an angle on a triangle. The audience is the 2 other angles on the triangle. The format, it's a breakup letter, and the topic is telling about why this one angle is different than these 2 other angles. But it can be, you can adapt it to basically any purpose and any topic, and we'll kind of talk about that a little more.
Well, and there are lots of websites for raft things.
And when we're talking about writing this afternoon, we will focus a lot on the audience and the format. Raft, R-A-F-T, role, audience, format, and topic. Yeah. Talk rubrics.
So the rubrics you can download from the KSDE website under ELA and then under the MDPT side. It's along the right side of that screen. And there's a different rubric, and I'm sure that most of you have looked at these. There's a different rubric for each text type. There's an argumentative rubric. There is an informational explanatory rubric, and then there's a different rubric for narrative. And then they're divided into those 4 sections, and then on that sliding scale for rating them. And so this is, and the scorers are well aware that this is not going to be a polished writing piece, so they will stick with the rubric, and the rubric doesn't demand that of the students. Even the rubric is geared so that they understand what the purpose for on-demand writing and what the product is going to look like. So.
All right, so let's talk graphic organizers. And Julie talked about is it a graphic organizer flowchart earlier. So when designing a graphic organizer to use for each of the text types, these are some things to keep in mind. So for the argumentative writing, your graphic organizer should contain, if they contain anything, they should at least contain these 3 things. Claim, evidence, and details. And for those of you familiar with like Chris strategies or like the Schaefer writing model, these are the major components of an argumentative essay. So the claim that's the main idea or the thesis. So what or your opinion, what is being argued? What is your position? What do you think? The evidence, what information supports the claim. So that's your concrete detail, your data, evidence from the text. And then your details, the explanation that connects to the claim. I think Schaefer model calls it the commentary. It's the warrant. It's just the explanation of of how your evidence supports your claim.
Claim, data, warrant. Some people refer to it that way.
Thesis, concrete detail, and commentary.
Yeah.
There are many ways to label them, but they all do the same thing.
And that analysis piece.
Yeah.
On argumentative, can we go back to that script for just a minute? Because we've had this talk, and I was talking earlier with some of you, and I think the shift from persuasive to argument as it's being used in the new standards and with the new assessments is that it's not like debate. I mean, that's not the purpose of persuasion as it once was, you know, with those persuasive techniques. It's more a rhetorical approach. We're looking more at it from the perspective of rhetoric. Just what is the topic and what are the facts about the topic, and let the reader decide for himself or herself. It's more a way, argument as it's being used today is more not debate type, I'm right, you're wrong, but a chance for us to learn from each other with differing viewpoints. And we have to come to be able to do that. You know, in an adult society, we already have too many. You know, if you teach AP, there's a book called Everything's an Argument. Well, maybe everything doesn't need to be an argument, you know. So we just need to be able to share differing opinions, and that's kind of the approach that they're taking here.
So it's like, where's your evidence? Where's your proof?
Right.
Not necessarily, I don't agree with you, just you're stating that, so where's your evidence?
Yes, and let's just broaden our understanding and broaden our perspectives.
Don't you have to include the counter argument? Isn't that a difference between persuasive and argumentative?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
You probably won't have time.
But yeah, the kids probably won't have time on the MDPT, but when you're teaching argument, yes. Right?
Yes. It's this classical, you know, ethos, pathos, and logos. That idea that you have to have emotion, so that you know that your audience, you know knows that you have some feeling behind your argument, but also you have to argue from authority, and you have to be logical about it.
My seniors last year struggled with that a little bit, moving out of the first person, in my opinion, I, and so we had to read a lot of rhetorical examples, speeches and things that were, it was very obvious, the position, the person's position, but they never did have to use, I believe, or you should, or, you know, that.
What type of word did you use?
Say that again?
What type of word did you use instead of, in my opinion, I?
Eliminate the first person and just
Just from the evidence given.
Yeah,
from
just
the information present.
Yeah, because that's, you know, that you want to be assertive, but the I thinks, I feels, and I believes, those that could turn it aggressive. We don't want our writing to be aggressive. We want it to be assertive.
That's a good distinction. Yeah, that's a very good distinction.
I have another. And this is kind of off. I'm back on to the graphic organizer. On non-graphic organizers that like I use in class for my argumentative, I mean, it has that verbiage on it. Is that okay to give for no? So it can't have any words
It can't
on
have,
it?
right, well, it can be maybe a blank one, but it's my understanding, and we'll have Susie clarify that you can't use the word claim evidence. I don't think you can, but we'll check.
Right here, it says such as claim and evidence are okay.
Oh, they are.
Okay, all right.
I mean, it's on this.
I stand corrected. Well, I read that last night, and I thought, the way it was worded, it confused me, and I thought, I don't think that's right, so. But I think, but the way you read it, it made sense to me, so, yeah.
So it is opposed?
Yeah, but we'll confirm that.
Okay.
We'll make sure that we'll make sure we tell you right. Not sure about the rubric. We'll ask about that as well, Karen. So, as far as graphic organizers, go ahead.
All right. So we'll come back to the. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Anyway, the next one is the informative / explanatory text tag, and what those should include, or at least are the main idea. You know, we got in the close reading. What's the gist, and what are the supporting details? So what helps explain that main idea? So what's the evidence? You know, kind of breaking down and figuring out what evidence supports that main idea. And then graphic organizers to support to support narrative text. Those should include characters. So who are the characters? What are they doing? The goals or attempts. What is the character aspiring to do? What's their goal? What's the conflict of the story? And the important events. What events or actions take place? That we are in the form of a plot diagram, or just like a bulleted list of what we are going to have them do.
So on your chart, on your diagram, what do your kids need to know? And you may need to add some pieces here. What do your kids need to know? What strategies do they need to know about how to take notes? What's the teaching that has to occur for them to be able to do that? These are the questions that students should be able to answer, like think through an answer. How do I frame the text type to organize my thoughts? How do I decide which evidence or details to use? For some kids, that's a hard thing, important versus unimportant details. They either think everything's important or nothing is important. You know, I mean, there are those kids that can't distinguish important from unimportant details. So what do you need to do as the teacher to help those kinds of issues from being roadblocks for kids? And we're going to talk a little bit about note-taking in just a little bit. So take just a minute or two and add anything you need to add to your poster, and then we're going to come back and talk about notes for just a little bit.
Okay. Does the graphic organizer exclude all discipline-specific content? So that's like being like specific science graphic. But it says content related to the organization of ideas, such as claim and evidence or stuff. So yeah, I mean, those would be
Add anything you need to add about how to teach your kids to take notes.
So highlighting.
This year.
Of course.
See where what he has to do, words that can be spelled different ways with the same
yeah, she says that you all got it on the website. Okay. Yeah. train seems to be being built as we're attempting to drive tracks.
They're dismantling track and front what's back this weekend. We're pumping it first.
I like it when they change the names. These changes in the names.
I like that. Right question. If they don't get it.
Chapter, section, paragraph.
See if that's there.
I'm in that guy's hand.
Yes. Pat on the back.
Are we should stop? All right, yeah. Because we want to get to the good part.
Yeah. Okay, let's kind of wrap up the next few seconds.
Oh, let's talk about note-taking first. Oh, so this question came up yesterday about note-taking from one of the principals that happened to be in the group. Like, what strategies do people use? And, you know, every teacher teaches things differently, but some resources that might be helpful are to look not just for resources on note-taking, but look for resources on annotation protocols and two-column notes or Cornell notes or what did you mention yesterday? I don't remember what you said yesterday. You were talking about two-column and Cornell, and then you said something else, but I forgot what it was.
Well, you brought up outlining, and then I also thought about I already mentioned the Mortimer Adler that essay, how to mark a book, which gives.
And here's something one of the participants brought up yesterday that I had never thought about, and it kind of stopped me, because she said when she's looking through a book, reading through a book, she can remember basically where she saw a piece of information, like, oh, that's in chapter 2, or, you know, that was about here, or which side of the page it was on. And she said when she's reading on her Nook or on her e-reader, she said she really struggles with, you can't make those, you don't have that visualization of landmarks. It's like, you know, directional things. So marking that digital text is a different skill. You know, when kids are reading, they're going to be reading this text digitally. So that's where those highlighting tools and those kinds of things, you know, maybe.
I know when you're reading PDFs, I use the like the sticky note, or if it's a Google Doc, I'll write. You know, I'll write notes for annotation. But you know, because I'm a prolific Post-it noter when I'm reading a book, so I'll write something down, slap it down there, and my books look like they're more Post-it notes than real text by the time I get done with them.
And so this may be, that note-taking piece may be something that, you know, I don't know how much you focus on that, but in your own instruction as you're working through with kids, it may be something that, you know, you may need to take a look at. So that's...
And that whole getting the, you know, going paragraph by paragraph or every couple of paragraphs, finding the gist. I mean, that's main idea, or that's a you know, summarization, or it can be paraphrasing. So there are a variety of ways to do that.
Yeah. And you want to do this for every lesson? No, that's overkill. We're going to do MDPT for every lesson? No. No. So, all right. So the burning question then is, how do you make that instruction for on-demand writing connected to the curriculum, so it's not just test prep? So it's actually an extension of, normal extension and normal flow, just part of your high quality, rigorous effective classroom instruction as it should be. So that's what we're looking for.
And the answer, preparing students for tests need not be separate from delivering good writing instruction. To the contrary, it can underscore best practice and exemplify best teaching, because a lot of the skills that are required to be demonstrated on the MDPT are some high quality instruction and skills that your students need. There's close reading, pre-writing, note taking, annotation.
So we have to take into consideration, we talked about reading, the close reading part before lunch. Now we're going to talk about the writing part of MDPT and how to prepare kids for that. So the writing process, of course, as we all know, consists of the steps for pre-writing or the idea gathering stage, the drafting, and then revising and editing. And honestly, this should be, I think, a loop. You know, it's not a linear thing. It's a loop. Revising, of course, for content, editing, of course, for spelling, capitalization, grammar, punctuation, and then coming to the publishing part. So that's the basic writing process. So when you look at 6 traits then, where that fits into this process, we have the 6+1 traits, and originally those came from Northwest Regional Education Laboratory in Washington. And if you've not checked their website recently, as of June 2014, they have all new rubrics, and they are very detailed rubrics for each one of the 6 traits. So you can get on nwrel.org and check out the new 6 trait rubrics. They are quite detailed. They have a K2 rubric, a 3, and then a 312 rubric. So for each one of the traits. So originally the traits were ideas organization, word choice, voice, sentence fluency, conventions. Conventions, of course, being the usage and mechanics and grammar part. And then they added the presentation piece for the 6+1. So when you look at the 6 traits compared with the writing process, it looks like that.
And so this is the process that for extended, more formal pieces that we like to go through. We start, it's very linear. You start with your pre-writing, you go to your drafting. The responding that's the feedback, so that could be teacher feedback or student feedback through peer editing. Then we go to revising and then editing for the conventions, and then finally you're ready to hand it in. But we can see there's the arrow between the revising, responding, and drafting, because this is an ongoing kind of recursive process where you learn more, discover more, and you get feedback, which helps improve the writing, but also improving your writing skills. And then it lists for each stage the things that we are going to each of the 6 traits that we are looking for in each of these steps.
So when you're thinking about what you did this morning, and you're looking at this whole process, when you look at standard number 10, writing standard number 10 on your bookmark, the range of writing, that's what this applies to for those longer writing pieces. And those shorter writing pieces might focus on 1 or 2 of those, or something entirely different for the shorter writing pieces. But the longer writing pieces would encompass all of that over a course of a few days, a week. But when you did on-demand writing, because now we're taking a look at the classroom instruction versus this one task, on-demand writing, what you did today, and you look at that whole process, what parts were you able to accomplish and what parts were you not able to accomplish? So take a look, talk about that for about 2 minutes with your table partners. For on-demand writing, what's there and what isn't?
all the steps that you
Because I didn't even get finished.
Yep.
even notice that like this, the pre-writing stage, we got the ideas, like when you're reading through, you got some of the ideas, but you didn't.
I didn't take time to actually do the organization.
Yeah.
So what parts are you able to get in with an on-demand task? What can you accomplish?
Pre-writing and drafting.
Okay, pre-writing and drafting.
You get a little bit of editing, you got a little bit of
Okay.
So if you have enough time, you can do some revising and editing. Now, when you use Kite to do this, it does have a spell check, so it'll do a little bit of the conventions part. Doesn't do any, doesn't do grammar.
It does, there's a lot of them which bothers mine.
Right. So the revising and editing is going to take place as you're drafting. You know, what little gets done will take place as you're drafting. So when you take a look at those rubrics, you take a hard look at those rubrics, you're going to see that reflected in the rubrics. They're not looking for a publishable piece. They are well aware, the scorers, that it's going to be in the draft stage with some possible revisions and editing. So, yeah.
So some of the differences, the length of time engaged in each step. I know when I have my students, my sophomores just wrote an essay over liberty and comparing the three different texts involved in people seeking liberty. And I mean, we spent a day with our pre-writing and doing thesis statements. Then we spent another day picking out evidence for the text, getting our topic sentences for our body paragraphs. A day doing our rough drafts. Another day with the peer editing and teacher editing, and then kids were kind of back and forth in all these steps. I'd see a thesis statement that I said, well, we could improve that, we could strengthen that. So I mean, this is a multi-day process, but here on demand, it's 2 days. You have 1 day for your research and 1 day to write. There's often an absence of revision, or if there is revision, you're doing it while you're typing, or you have time and then you reread it and you go over it and you fix things that you see. And usually can only complete the process once. So missing this recursive nature of writing, where you write it out and then you discover that there's things that can be improved, and so you go back and fix them. In the process of fixing them, you teach yourself to become a better writer. This recursive nature is missing in the on-demand. Now, what are some of the same things? Well, even though it is a modified and abbreviated process, there still is a process that we're using, while most of the steps are present, even though they are in a modified or abbreviated form. The presence of purpose, audience, context, and form. So those are all things that we have to keep in mind, and those are all things that match up with the regular writing process. And the attention to quality, those 6 traits that we mentioned, to some degree. We don't get to worry about them as much as we can, because there's just not enough time.
Yeah, 6 traits is for instruction, not for the assessment.
Yeah. So how can we capitalize on the similarities between long and short writings in our instruction? Well, the process of writing on demand can be learned within a larger, more robust engagement with a writing process that encourages student independence. So I've got the kid, we all have the kids that when we're writing an essay, they come up to you and like, I don't get it, how do I do this? Well, just write my thesis statement for me, then I can do the rest. And so we have to, as I tell them, baby bird, I have to push you out of the nest a little bit. You're gonna have to fly on your own. We're going to have to, you know, and then you give them enough help that, to go back to the first couple of slides, we need to get them into that learning zone. We don't want them so freaked out by the writing process that they shut down, but we can't do it for them. Otherwise, they're in that comfort zone and they don't do anything. But we need to, you know, this is the point where we need to scaffold so we can stretch them. So give them just enough help that they are able to accomplish it on their own while still learning stuff. So, you know, encouraging that independence.
I think let's go on.
Okay.
Let's get started on this other one.
Okay.
All right, so some of you already had this part about synthesizing the three. This is a high-level Bloom's taxonomy thing we're asking them to do by the time they get to MDPT. They're having to apply multiple streams of knowledge, and they're having to synthesize and analyze as well. So is there anything else before we go on to actual lesson planning that you need to add to your poster about how to help kids internalize that writing process, and anything else you need to teach them about synthesizing those three texts? So you can add that to your poster if there is. And let's go ahead and go on. Okay, so if you go to this website, some of you have already seen this, community.ksde.org, community.ksde.org/ELA, you will find prepared lessons for MDPT, for science, social studies, ELA, grades 3 through 12, well, 3 through high school. Don Gifford, if you teach only social studies or American history, he has on their homepage there are additional lessons prepared as well. So what we use to test this process, Stephanie Schwitzky, who teaches at Royal Valley, was one of our participants early on, back in the fall when we were testing this process. And so we helped her design a lesson that she actually used in class with her high school students. And they were reading Walden at the time, or some of Thoreau at the time. And so she was, the issue of technology and self-sufficiency. Does technology make us more self-sufficient or less self-sufficient? That was kind of the essential question that she was talking about. Now, essential questions, which we'll talk about in a bit, are those broad umbrella type questions. Grant Wiggins and McTighe, if you're familiar with them. If not, they're worth looking up. Wiggins and McTighe about essential questions. So we helped her find the resources that she was going to use, the three resources that she was going to use. She used a selection from On Walden Pond about self-sufficiency. She used a selection from Harrison Bergeron, and she used that wonderful YouTube video by Corning Glass called A Day Made of Glass, about where technology may one day take us. And so then she used those three resources. Using those same three resources, she prepared a narrative prompt, an informational explanatory prompt, and an argumentative prompt. So she used the same three resources and then designed three separate prompts. Then she had the kids write to those. And then Susie went in after, Susie Ortel went in after they had finished their writings, and then they were, analyzing the writings. And what they first discovered was those kids latched onto the word technology and didn't pay attention to what the prompt was actually asking them. So that's a great formative lesson there for the teacher. So she realized right away that you've got to teach the kids to really pay attention to what the prompt is asking. Make sure that you understand the prompt. So there's another, another skill subset that we've got to make sure our kids know. So from that, and from 2 years ago in Sacramento, when we were still part of Smarter Balance, some of us were in Sacramento looking at the writing products that had come out of their process, and it was very much like this. So CETE has done a good job of replicating that process, and the one that I looked at was about the gold rush, and they've used the same process. They've used 3 resources, a miner's diary, some entries from a miner's diary, just an informational piece about the prospecting that went on in 1849 there, and then they used a map of some of the miners' claims. And then from those 3 resources, they designed the narrative prompt, the informational prompt, and the argumentative prompt. And the kids wrote on those. And then we were using the rubrics to evaluate those. So that's the process that we're talking about when you're designing a lesson. So this is the template, and you have it in front of you that we're going to be working from for the rest of the day. So we're going to walk you through each section in this template, and then we're going to give you time to devise an MDPT lesson. So these ones that are completed and prepared online already, you can use them just as they are. If they suit your needs, you can take them and adapt them. You can pull pieces from them. You can use the resources, design your own. They are just examples of lessons that can be created using the MDPT process and the template.
So you can borrow them because teachers never steal. We always borrow.
So now we're going to have you do this. Okay, so we're going to walk you through the template, take a break, and then have you come back.
So everybody should have a template.
I can't come back.
All right, great. So this is what it looks like, or you can just look at your table. Step 1, select a topic and create essential questions. So let's talk about essential questions. How many people are familiar with them or use essential questions? Okay, see a few hands. All right, so what are essential questions? There are questions that are not answerable with finality in a single lesson or a brief sentence. The aim is to stimulate thought, provoke inquiry, and spark more questions, including thoughtful student questions, not just pat answers. They are provocative and generative. I like that word, generative. By tackling such questions, learners are engaged in uncovering the depth and richness of a topic that might otherwise be obscured by simply covering it. So these are the broad questions that are going to get your kids into the unit. If you teach by thematic units, these are the overarching questions for that unit.
Wait, go back. You've got to read the yellow on the slide before. Word of warning, because essential questions are those overarching ones, the ones that you're using to teach from in class, they won't necessarily be answered. So there are not going to be any essential questions on the assessment, only the guiding questions. So you have the essential question up here, and then the guiding questions, which we'll talk about in a little bit, feed into that essential question.
Okay, so let's be quick. You guys are going to ace this because you guys are super smart. Essential questions should have a single, final, and correct answer, true or false?
False.
They are worth revisiting again and again. Essential questions are aimed at the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Basic. An essential question is the same as the prompt. All right, an essential question may cause students to ask additional questions and spark further inquiry. Okay, and I think I was pretty good at modeling this. On the glass doors back here, I've got kind of just like the bare bones of what you're about to create, and this is based on a unit that I just completed with my freshmen last semester. So my essential question is, what do people endure to achieve freedom? So it's kind of broad, open-ended, but it allows me to get to access several texts and to, as a basis for the guiding questions that I've also written, which I'll show you when we talk about this. All right, step 2, add a set of resources that support the selected topic. So you're going to select texts that are organized around a single topic, represent different types of texts, and texts that student might encounter at their grade level. So around my essential question of what do people endure to achieve freedom, the text that I have are Martin Luther King's March on Washington, an excerpt from the novel Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and an excerpt of the graphic novel Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. And so there are three different types of texts. One is a speech, one's a graphic novel, but a nonfiction graphic novel, and then Fahrenheit 451, which is fiction.
When you access the sample lessons, we were having to use things that are out in the public domain because we can't, use copyrighted things. So I can't promise you that the texts that you use are going to equal that 1,000 words at our level, but they'll be as close as we could get them. So another assessment piece of information, just like the former assessments, the texts, the resource set that the kids will be using are going to be at grade level with vocabulary words that may be up to 2 grade levels above. That's just like, we've always done. So when you're selecting texts or for your students to read or for your lesson, that's something to keep in mind. As close to 1,000 words as you might get if you want to replicate the process. If you're using it for instructional tool, for instruction, you may choose broader, longer text than that. That's a professional decision that you would have to make based on the needs of your students. But we just wanted to caution you or inform you of the differences there between instruction and assessment.
Let me show Common Lit.
Yes. So this is a resource that's just brand new and you might find useful. It's called Common Lit. Susie, well, I guess the lady actually emailed Susie. So I think it's from Harvard.
So it asks you to choose a theme, choose a discussion question, choose a text, and get ready. So you click on the Get Started, and then you can see these are the overarching themes. They lead us to these essential questions. So if I look down at justice and freedom and equality, you get the essential question: what is fair, or which is more important, freedom and security? And then you click on that, and you can choose which question you want, and it gives you resources at grade level. Sometimes it's more than one, but so far it's just for each of these it's just one. So this is, and it also gives you the Lexile. So and this says for grades 8, 9, but and it's excerpts from Leviathan by the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, but it's at Lexile 1510. So it seems like you could do that. You could use that from a little higher than just 8, 9. So when you were formulating your practice text set, this is a resource that you could use, and it's a good resource for ELA and for HUGS. For social studies. Yeah.
So that's step 2. So step 1 is your essential questions. Step 2, come up with your resource set. There's another, this is on the tiny URL, this selection of websites that might be helpful to you as you're choosing a resource set. Okay, so then step 3 is you've got your resources, you've got your essential question, and then if you look down the left-hand side of your template, there is a section for each text type. Well, this would be 3rd to 5th grade. So ours says argumentative, informational, explanatory, and narrative. And so then you're going to design a prompt for each one of those. Now, not every topic will lend itself easily to all 3 prompts, but you should be able to get 2 prompts. So when you actually look at some of the prepared ones that are on the MDPT part of the website, not all of them will have all 3. but all of them will have two, at least two, and many of them will have all three. So that's your next step, is to devise the prompts that you're asking kids to respond to. And go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to say, for my units, so I've got my essential question, what do people endure to achieve freedom? I've got my texts, and then I've got my guiding questions. Do you have to struggle in order to achieve freedom? What risks do people have to take in order to gain freedom? And what are the costs for those who live without freedom? And then using those guiding questions and the text, I came up with my prompts for narrative, informative, and argumentative. So my narrative is, imagine you live in the society of Fahrenheit 451 or Persepolis. Write a short story about your life living without freedom. Explain how it negatively affects your life. For informative, using all three texts define the word freedom. And for argumentative, is freedom given freely or must it be demanded? So use evidence from the text to prove your answer. So all three prompts are using all of the texts, and they're using then they're making the kids use, synthesize information from the text, but also
synthesize information from the text. Yes.
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 They were
Yes.
doing all of that.
Yes. All right, and we said we were going to talk about raft writing, and we can see they just added to it. So the role, audience, format, topic
Is there.
But we also add the context and the strong verb for your prompt. So you're telling the kids do this. So it's context, role, audience, format, topic, strong verb.
So rafts can become crafts if you so choose. We need some more acronyms in the educational world.
Yes.
There are not enough.
So I've got, I've got my strong verbs: imagine and explain. Imagine's probably better than explain. Got define, and then use evidence.
This is also on the tiny URL, just for that writing standard number 10, some shorter assignments, some longer assignments, what you hope to accomplish with each kind of writing, and some of the types of prompts. You may use some of these for your prompts. What do you want the kids to do? So then step 4, if you look, these are, remember we can't have an essential question because there's not time for that, and it takes too long to address an essential question. So this is our opinion piece, and our prompt is here, and then our guiding questions are over here to help the kids focus their note-taking, to focus their reading, to focus their idea gathering on what they're going to have to know and what they're going to have to do to be able to write an argumentative piece, what they're going to have to know and be able to do to write an informational piece, what they need to know. So the guiding questions guide their thinking, guide their note-taking, guide their pre-writing stages so that they can produce each piece of writing.
Because they won't have the prompt. They'll have the guiding questions the first day, but they will not have the specific prompts.
And whether you decide to do it that way in your class, that's your professional expertise there. So the guiding questions support each writing type. They are text dependent. Good word there. You've got to go back into the text, just like you said earlier, to provide that evidence. And then help them synthesize the content of all three of those resources. And then, now, this is the rubric part. So you actually take the rubric and look at the rubric for each one of the writing types, and you figure out for this prompt, what off the rubric will the kids have to do? And you just move it over there into kid-friendly language. So those first two columns, the guiding questions and the prompt, are content specific. This one is rubric specific. So you're taking it straight from the rubric to help kids. So when they're on the test part, on the assessment part, these are the reminders. This is the reminders part to help kids really understand what they need to be looking for and doing as they write. And that's what you want them doing these things as they write. So we've showed you this in a 3-5 on a grade 3-5. Here, this one's taken straight from section 1 of the rubric, reworded into kid-friendly language. This one's taken from the evidence piece, from the conventions piece. So we just take the language of the rubric and move it over here. So that's, this column is rubric specific. The Vermont Writing Collaborative, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but boy, they are worth knowing. They have their own website, Vermont Writing Collaborative, but they've done a lot of work. They did about 18 months of work almost 3 years ago now, kind of benchmarking what writing looks like across the country by grade level. And then they took that information that they developed, and they worked with achievethecore.org, with that organization, to create this website called In Common Effective Writing for All Students. It's called In Common Effective Writing for All Students. If you type that in as a search, it will come up to Achieve the Core. And so what that website has is writing samples from all grade levels for all 3 text types. And what the Vermont Writing Collaborative has done in some of their schools in Vermont is that they do all school, one example I'll use is with water conservation, and the whole school wrote about that one topic so that they could really measure progress. So the kindergartners were writing about water conservation with resources at their grade level that the kindergarten teachers had chosen, and first graders were writing at their grade level. So each grade level, the teachers at each grade level chose appropriate resource sets, and then they developed the prompts based on their own students' needs. So they have a whole learning progression within their own school. So that's a way that some schools are tackling this writing process to measure continuous progress over time. So, but the resources here are well worth your time to look up. In Common Writing, Effective Writing for All Students.
All right, so some of the possible uses for these samples. Student analysis to help students consider the qualities of good or poor writing and compare or contrast a good piece of writing in order to guide revisions. So you want to show good examples.
Modeling.
Yes. They already have enough bad habits, probably. I don't mind now. Are there any other things you can think of that we might use examples for?
Nope.
Give them 7 seconds of wait time. Okay.
Okay. Again, all of this information is on the community.ksde.org/ELA. But we want you to take a break and then come back, and we're going to give you your final assignment with what you need to have accomplished before you leave today. So stand up, stretch, if that's all you need to do. I know it's warm in here, get a drink or whatever you need to do, and we'll be back. What time, Mr. Taskmaster?
Like 2:05?
2:05. 2:05.
It's like 7 minutes?
2:05.
7 minutes.
Chat for just a little bit.
Okay.
A very little bit. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions that were emailed to me and across the wall. This one was, can you tell students to check the reminder? And Julie and I spoke, and it sounded like this was more of an ethics type of question, like can you remind the students? And since with this being a field test year, I think that it might be inappropriate once the students have started doing that to walk over and say, remember, do that. But I think if you wanted to just remind them as you're prepping them, like practicing the tools and things like that, and oh, by the way, there's this button that you'll have to click, I think that's entirely appropriate. We, meaning KSDE and CETE, are going to have to sit down after this and talk through some of these questions that we're getting from the field now that we see how the test actually looks, and think about some of those things like that. You know, what things are missing from the script that we'll need to add into the script so that students are clear on what they should do. So if you have any other things like that, please feel free to send them my way. I'll make sure that my email address is somewhere. Okay. The other one is, how similar is the History, Government, Social Studies performance task to the MDPT? I think it was included in the PowerPoint slide that we really tried to ensure that there would be a single performance task that would get at a set of skills that spanned across multiple disciplines, hence multidisciplinary performance task. And so the History, Government, Social Studies performance task, at least in all the grades up until high school, is exactly the same. Kids aren't going to be taking two different ones, because that was a concern that we were trying to alleviate, that the concern of students having to take multiple tests. We were trying to reduce that.
So this year, if they're, as an 8th grader, if they've already taken the MDPT, they don't take the performance test at social.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same one.
Oh, really?
We have it scheduled for both. Yeah, separately.
Yeah. So do we?
They'll just be field testing. There's a social studies assessment that is a machine scoreable assessment. That there's But the MDPT, it's helpful to think of it as a standalone assessment. Okay. That's just going to be, the scores are going to be allocated to different content areas. But it might be helpful to just think of it as it's its own thing, and those scores are going to be allocated to different content areas.
So she just said it was the same thing.
The performance test.
I know, but we have 4 days scheduled for the social studies assessment schedule, because there's bidding for the non-performance part, the I can answer questions part. But then there's also that a day set aside for performance.
So they'll just need one of those sets of times. So if you have that double covered, there won't be anything to take.
I can fill in the bubble portion.
They'll still have that part of the social studies assessment, and then they'll have a performance task that will be the MDPT. And they'll,
yeah. But if you've already taken the MDPT,
then they
have
will take
a
that,
performance
right?
test.
But they can take it in the social studies. All the schools are doing all kinds of different things as far as how they're administering it. Some are doing it with the English teachers. Some are doing it with
I think that's our higher
Are
ups
we
at our district
headed towards using this so that we can not do these different assessments? Because like the 8th graders have got the reading English, they've got the math, they've got the social studies, they've got.
They will have science. Yeah, 8th grade is one that we have talked about. They are looking at 8th grade.
All that too, except they've got science instead of social.
They're looking at 8th grade really closely because obviously it's hit really hard with all of those assessments. So we don't have an answer to that yet, but they are looking really the concern is shared at the state level. So yeah, they're looking really closely at that. I can't comment on that. I mean, there are all kinds of requirements that we have from a federal level, from a state level, so it really depends on that. We do have a common interest in making sure that students aren't being unnecessarily tested and spending lots and lots of time doing a state assessment. There are lots of, though, local assessments that students do that aren't part of state assessment, and there's not really much control that the state can have over what those things are. So I can't comment on what's to come because we just don't know. We just don't know.
Well, I'm just glad to know you're thinking about it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's an issue. It's almost a week of time.
Yeah.
You know, and add all the hours together.
Sure.
We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
That came up just verbally. One question was, can the rubrics be like a graphic organ? I mean, can they have the rubrics out to look at as they are tested?
I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, the reason that we have the reminders is because we felt like the kid seeing the entire rubric might be a little bit too overwhelming for the student. And so we made the decision to, instead of having the full rubric there for the student, to just create that set of reminders that aligns to the level 4 rubric descriptors. So, for example, the student will see something like, have you used 2 resources? Or, you know, that was the intent. But I don't see why there's a problem if you had paper printed rubrics for the students to see if they wanted that. Sure.
And the other question was on the is it a graphic organizer or not?
Mm-hmm.
Right down at the bottom it said they can't be content specific, but words like claim and evidence are okay.
Sure, because those are specific to the writing task. And so if you're asking the student, if you have a graphic organizer that says something like claim, you know, define the claim or define your claim, and the student can fill that in, that's okay. What they didn't want, or what the concern was from content area consultants, was that teachers would use the graphic organizers as a way to give students hints about content, like try to put on a bunch of facts about history that, you know, don't really belong on a graphic organizer, that will give students content rather than help them organize their ideas.
So basically, as long as it's blank, they can use it?
Did she show you the decision tree? It doesn't have to be entirely blank, but there's a set of questions. It's like 4 questions, pretty simple process for determining whether it's okay or not. Yeah, and you can just look through that and maybe talk with your test coordinator or building administrator if you have one that you're wondering, will this work or not, and talk through those questions with that person and decide together.
Do you find, because we just did it this last week. They're having just such they only can see like about, 8 lines that they're typing or something.
Okay.
So they don't really have a feel for how much they
the length of the text?
Yeah.
Of the text, of the resource?
Of the text of what they're writing.
Oh, okay.
Because as I understand it, I wasn't in there because our counselor gives it, but it's like a quarter of the screen that they can actually see what they're writing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Yes, that issue came up yesterday. They talked about that.
Okay. I tell you what, I am collecting those kinds of comments in a document, and then CETE and we will get together and share those things with this field test. Because some of it, I haven't, been in a classroom with students doing it to see those very issues, and that is an issue.
Well, that was a concern. Yeah. And it's a stupid little thing, but it bothered some of my kids big time because they couldn't indent. They couldn't indent, and I've been on them all year about indenting, and now they couldn't do it.
Huh, okay. All right, thank you for that. And like I said, if you have other things like that that come up, there were some that a gentleman shared with me yesterday, and I put them into my document. So I would love to know things like that, that if there's something in the way that the screen appears or anything really, please send those my way and I'll put them in the document. Any other questions? Yeah.
Our instructional coordinator, I'm not sure where she found it, but she had like a chart that said the topic of the MDPT, and one of them it said science and social studies. If it's science, would that still be part of the social studies?
That chart is for the field test. Okay. So it's only for the field test. So if you think about the performance task in the future, once it's operational, and that's why I say 8th grade is going to be an issue. They're going to have to think through what are we going to do for 8th grade. But for example, in grades where there are multiple ones, like 6th grade.
7th it said buried.
Right. We'll have multiple topics. And really it just refers to the topics. And so there will be science topics and history, government, social studies topics field tested. And if you think about field testing, for example, multiple choice questions, it's really easy to put field tested multiple choice questions, just embed them into a larger multiple choice assessment without the student really noticing that much. When you try to do that for a field test of a performance task, it's going to be noticeable because the student will obviously have to do a whole other session. And so for this field test, for example, in 8th grade where they have to do both science and history, government, social studies, you two could be in a single classroom and you could have history, government, social studies resources and you could have science resources because they're just being field tested. There's no need for you to do all of them or for you to do all of them. They're field testing.
So that's
all
just this year.
Just this,
so
for
in
this year.
like next year, the 8th grade
There will be
performance task would only be history,
one
government
or
based.
whatever they decide. Yeah, for 8th grade. Now for the other grades, 8th grade is different. So, but for the other
How
grades,
is 8th grade? I don't. How is 8th grade?
because science is given every year.
Okay.
But in every other year, history, government, social studies. So on the years that history, government, social studies would be given, they don't want 8th graders to have to take 2. So that's why it's different.
Okay.
But in 6th grade, for example, there will be a decision made that, this year we're doing history, government, social studies.
Okay.
So 6th graders would all do the MDPT and they would all have history, government, social studies.
So the year the test is given, it should only be, okay.
So who would give the MDPT when the social studies class? You probably said it, but it's not saying.
It really doesn't matter. And I actually made an updated chart to that one because people get really bogged down in, okay, well in 5th grade, so I'll get calls and say, okay, so in science, my 5th graders will start to have to write. I better start writing with my 5th graders in science class, okay? And the point of that Venn diagram to show that we're looking at, and did you look at all the wordles? Yeah. The wordles of the standards? Really the point of this assessment, one of the points of this assessment is showing it's this skill set. So whether the student has science resources or social studies resources or a variety of resources, that to me doesn't matter as much as what are you asking the student to do? Read these resources, interact with these resources, think about these resources in a critical way, and then write to a prompt. And that's the skill set that should be happening in all of those content areas anyway. So I wouldn't get too bogged down in, but are they going to be reading social studies? Because they're not really being tested on the social studies content per se.
Yeah, so we're trying, we don't.
I would think of it as a standalone assessment. Some years it's going to be attributed to history, government, social studies. Some years it's going to be attributed to science. Each year it will be attributed to English language arts. Okay. Every year.
Every year it's writing.
Every year it's,
And where is this script?
it's on the, maybe, there's one on the KSDE.
Because I tried to find it.
If you go to the ksde.org and click on A, it's under assessment. There's a page of assessments and it'll say manual, and scripts are in there. Other questions?
Have a great group, Susie.
Good.
Just get ready to do their lesson plan.
Awesome. Well, again, if you have any questions at all, just quick questions, you can put them in the today's meet if they're quick. If you have feedback for me, please send it to me on my KSDE email address, which is actually at the end of this slideshow. All right, thank you.
So, here's what we need for you to accomplish by 2:50. We'll do a progress check at 2:50, and then we'll do the closing from 2:50 to 3 is our plan. So it might be 3:15, but we're going to shoot for 3 o'clock. So between now and 2:50, this is the part we need to have. We want you to leave here today with the topic filled out, the essential question or essential questions completed. The resource set may or may not be completed. I mean, there may be at least 1 or 2. And then we would like for you to have guiding questions and at least two of the 3 prompts. So that's what we're looking for. Topic, essential question, resources, possibly 2 of the 3 prompts with the guiding questions. Questions? You can work together, you can work alone, you can find somebody else on your grade level and work together that way. It's up to you how you do this. You can work school by school, or it's just however you approach it. Any questions?
Do you have another one of these?
I sure do. I have multiple ones. Yeah. And I will, we'll be walking around and we can do a progress check. Right hand side, here's all of our MDPT goodies. Merry Christmas, right here. MDPT, there's the overview, the FAQ document, there are the rubrics, there are the explanations. This is from February when we were kind of organizing stuff. And then right down here are your samples for 3rd through 5th grade, 6th through 8th grade. This one's mine. I did that one. I may have done that one as well. I can't remember now. And then the graphic organizer, that little nifty flow chart we showed. And then looky here. Right here, you guys are going to be all live and in person on camera after today. So, yep. And then there's the writing on demand. Awesome. There's all the Achieve the 4 resources. It's the right-hand side, the whole right-hand side of that community.org/ELA.
Are those down there part? You had said this was the website for lesson plans.
Yeah, right here.
And those are the lesson plans.
Yeah, I'll just pull up this one because I did this one. But I can't remember which one it is. Yeah, this is Freedom Summer 1964.
We did that in my class. Yeah, we read the article. Kids said, "What happened to me?" She just finally we're gonna get killed. I mean, it opened up a whole. We got to know that, so we did research and find out what happened.
Yay! That makes me feel so good. That's what we're talking about.
I didn't know you did that. That's good. We used that one. They liked it.
Good. Yay! That makes me feel proud. So yep. So there are our essential questions. What does the right to vote really mean, and what sacrifices are required to guarantee the right to vote? And then just follows the thing. And then the resources are there, so all you have to do is print them off and use them. And yes, they did find them.
Yes, I know they were 44 days later. They were still. They were all shot in the head.
Shoved into a pond.
Sheriff was, you got the rest kid said, this book, that book is vocabulary.
Well, my essential question is, what do people look for to achieve freedom? It's all about freedom.
He's guilty.
Good for them. They're getting goosebumps. I'm not kidding you. That was awesome.
They love that.
So my guiding question is, do you have to struggle in order to achieve freedom? And then I got my topic,
something like this, where it's, you can, once you start your reading, it's slow.
And that's like we said, when we started discussing, we were all working, just like you are, we were working for the group with our first time. And, we just do the process once again.
So the bottom line is science, social studies, isn't really once you know how to do that,
I'm not going to just newspaper or just Fox News. I want
says very impressive.
Yeah, I agree.
The whole thing, I didn't have nothing to do with that.
Here, right here, see?
Every show, that's what I was asking.
And they have short clips with my, oh my gosh, you guys are working so hard, I'm so proud of you. How we doing, kids? We get to a stopping point? All right. Yes. Okay. I want to call your attention to a couple of housekeeping details before we wrap up. Over here are our 3 evaluation questions. I really liked, and if there's something that you really liked about today, you can write that on a sticky note and stick it up there, or you can write it right on the paper if you want to. I found this part not as useful. If there's some part of today that was not as helpful to you, you can sticky note or write it up there. I have a burning desire or need for more professional development on, and if there's something that qualifies there that you want to comment on, write it up there or put a sticky note on. And as we're wrapping up, you have a squishy on your table. So I want to go around and who has the hand? Okay. Pat on the back. What's something that, or somebody, or some helpful idea that you'd like to give a pat on the back to today?
I want to give these 2 ladies a pat on the back because they have helped me to be able to use technology to, when my kids write a research paper on how to do a bibliography and stuff online, the easy way that works.
Good. That's why we come to these things, is to learn from each other. Who's got the smiley face? Something that made you happy today?
Oh, so many things.
Wow, they answered for you.
I was happy to meet Karen. I just enjoy meeting people, and I came here by myself because my coworkers came yesterday, so.
It's nice to make those contacts.
I like that too, plus I like those marks.
Oh, good, good. Take away. Who has the, what do you guys have over there? Oh, the bone. Something you're still going to need to chew on when you leave here.
All of it.
All of it. That's a typical 8th grade response right there. You got the light bulb. What's the light bulb moment for you today? The ELA doesn't what?
Copy of the MDPT.
Oh, that's a revelation. And we've got a brain, something that added a wrinkle to your brain today.
That it's the process at individual student levels, not making sure that every student achieves at the same level.
Ooh, that's good. That is profound. That's a good one. And you guys have the strong, they're the ones who are leaving with the strong arm today, something that you feel confident about as you walk out of here.
We know more about what we're supposed to do for our goal for testing.
Okay?
And not just testing, but a whole
Instructional process.
a positive Pandora's box.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. We English teachers like that. And you guys had the ear. So what's something you heard today that's going to stick with you or made you think or wonder about? Or
I think maybe that we were talking earlier this morning about text complexity. Complexity doesn't necessarily mean you have to have 3 different levels of text, but how you break it down for your kids.
yeah, text complexity and differentiation. That was profound. Did I miss somebody squishy? Do you want to go to the last slide that's got Susie's address on it? And then or Susie's email. And you can email Susie with your questions, comments, complaints, or criticisms, compliments. Those are a lot of C words. Is it on there? Oh, it's S or tell. S. There we go. S or tell at ksde.org. Brian and I are going to stick around probably till 3:30. So, huh? So make sure that you sign here. Make sure that you sign it up here, or stick a sticky note up there, and we'll help you finish up if you need some time to finish up. And thank you all for a good day. The day before spring break.